Good day, everyone. And it's another beautiful and wonderful day. And we have a stunning, I hope she's stunning because I don't even know what she does. Does she have a stunning history? Is her job I don't know. You know what I'm like, listeners. I just get on there. I don't even know. Do you know what? I can't even pronounce her. Can I pronounce your surname? Should I try it?
Give it a shot.
Brenda Neckvatal.
There you go.
Whoa! 2 out of 30 podcasts. Now that's not bad for me. That's amazing. Brenda, thank you for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, you're going to have a bit of a bumpy ride at the moment, considering that I don't have a clue what you do. But anyway, you're going to help with that because you're going to let us know what you do as a business and how you help people, and then we'll go with the flow from there.
Absolutely. So I joke around and I say that I'm a recovering human resource professional, affectionately known as the Grim Reaper. It's how it is with HR these days, right? But yeah, and I have to apologize. My director of security has been barking in the background, so he's at work right at the moment. And so what I do is I actually help leaders cut through the drama and really kind of figure out what the root cause of what's going on and help them deal with difficult people personalities so they can get their people side of their business right. But most importantly, to start knocking that out of the way, so then that way they can actually grow and scale their business and everybody reaches new levels of success. And so that's what I do these days.
Okay, so you just basically help leaders to be able to communicate better with the people that are around them.
Yep. Absolutely.
And to focus specifically on where their weaknesses are.
Yep.
That's quite a skill. And especially it's a skill in a way that you've got to be very careful how you speak to these leaders, because it's in a way you're telling them, your people skills ain't that great. Do you find it can be challenging sometimes?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've had leaders come up and ask me for my advice, and then I give it very straightforward, and I do it in a very compassionate way because I believe that being straightforward really is the purest form of compassion. Not necessarily holding back, but it's sometimes not so much how you say it, but how well you articulate it. And I look at my dyslexia and my ability to see the world differently more as a superpower rather than I see it as a kryptonite. It has literally forced me to figure out how to have very strong and, under certain circumstances, superior interpersonal skills. I have to, doing what I do.
But I'm guessing that it wasn't always this case.
No, removed.
You had to go through, and the reason why I feel you, because I'm dyslexic myself, and so I get it. It's a tough and hard journey until you get to a certain point. So, but this podcast isn't about me. It is about you. So let's talk more about that. So it's a situation where now you know how to deal with your dyslexia. You know that it's a superpower because you know where your strengths lie, you know where your weaknesses are, so you know how to handle it and manage that. But let's go back to where things were really difficult for you way back in the days when it comes to dyslexia. Now you've got hindsight, but at the time you didn't have that that foresight. So go back when it was really, really difficult before you knew what the issue was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Back to the crib, you have to. It's all cool.
Yeah. So for me, so here in the United States, we have what's called primary school or elementary school. I think it would be referred to more commonly internationally as primary school, right? Mm-hmm. So our elementary years, when the faculty, the teaching staff, and they start seeing that kids are struggling in certain areas, they start to run them through a battery of tests. Well, I grew up, my earlier years were in the 70s, and I started demonstrating struggles. And I remember the first time I saw a multiplication issue and I thought I was going to fall off my chair. Yeah. Scared the hell out of me. It was in second grade. We hadn't even gone over it yet. And I didn't realize until later in life, like so something happened to where my dyslexia was misdiagnosed. It was skipped or missed or something, right? So I always struggled. And so the faculty staff, I would get bounced back between our remedial classes and our regular classes. And so the remedial teachers were like, you don't belong here. And then the regular teachers were like, no, she does. And so that was very frustrating. You know, I was sent to remedial math, but I never had any help actually learning how to do math. I was sent to remedial reading, and I could absolutely crush certain skills. I remember there was this one exercise that we used to do where you would sit and they would flash a number up from a projector on a screen, and just like that. And I could recount all 8 numbers. I would just see it and then write it down. And I had the fastest speed. So it was very confusing as to what was going on. And so it wasn't until, believe it or not, I was 32. And I was at work one day and I said something backwards. And it was something that my dad used to say as a joke all the time. But I just said it, didn't even think about it. And I said it backwards. And then another time I was on the phone with our director of human resources. This is actually a really funny story. I was on the phone with my director of human resources, who was one of my bosses. And I was talking to him about a situation where we had an employee that needed to apply for workers' compensation assistance. And it was, and I have to think about this, carpal tunnel syndrome.
Oh, I know it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm on the phone and he says, well, I said, I've never done this before. I said, what? He says, what's going on? I said, well, she has tunnel carpal syndrome. And he goes, wait, excuse me? and I said, like, I wonder if his cell phone broke up or something. So, and then I said, okay. He said, tell me again. And I said, she has tunnel carpal syndrome. And he starts laughing. Now I'm starting to get a little irritated. I'm like, why are you laughing at something like that? She's like in pain. She can barely even write right now. And he says, I'm sorry. He says, okay, so she has, and he paused and I said, tunnel carpal syndrome. And he starts laughing all over again. And now I'm really getting angry because I don't hear it. I don't hear what I'm doing. And he's howling. And I'm like, what the hell is the matter with you? I flew out of my mouth. And he's laughing. He says, do you hear what you're saying? And I'm like, oh shit, no. What am I? Now I'm starting to laugh. Like I went from being in the red all the way down to the green. And I'm like, okay, what am I saying? And he's like, you're saying tunnel carpal syndrome. And I have to think about carpal tunnel syndrome because I just say it automatically, right? So I had said something like that in front of somebody else who was dyslexic, and he turned and he looked at me and he says, are you dyslexic? And I'm like, well, not that I know of. Why? And he said, you're doing exactly what I do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're kidding. So I wound up going to a reading specialist. And I sat down because there's a company out here called Sylvan Learning Center in the United States, and they're all over the place, and they deal with kids. And I've been a child over there. Like I was sent over there. It's like part of this whole figuring out process, right?
Okay. All right.
So I walked in and I'm like, listen, I think I'm out of your demographic, but I need to tell you about what's going on. And I kind of need some guidance. And so the guy says, you are showing classic symptoms of being dyslexic. So I'm like, wonderful. Now, what do I do? So at 32 years old, I learned how to reread as an adult. And how I did it was I would start reading and I would read with a dictionary. So when things started getting mixed up in my mind, I couldn't understand it. It was just like, I would go back and I would look up, believe it or not, I would look up almost every word in that sentence. So what I started training my brain to do was I started training my brain to understand the sentiment first. And then it kicked in for me. So that's just how I did it. Now, at this time, this was about 2004, 4. I decided in 2005 to go back to school. I went university. So I had a couple years under my belt. I wanted to finish my college degree. I wanted to get my bachelor's degree. I spent my whole academic from kindergarten all the way through high school, primary for, my whole young education, C, D, F student.
Yeah.
my first couple years of university, challenge, same thing. C, D, student.
Yeah.
I crushed it and I graduated with honors.
Good for you.
Because I figured out, I cracked the code, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I graduated magna cum laude, very super excited about my GPA. And I went on and I got my master's, and I missed my GPA by like 0.05. So my bachelor's GPA is just like 0.05 points higher than my master's, right? And I'm actually considering going for my doctorates. I haven't decided, I haven't fully committed to that just yet, but that's a possibility for me. And so I just figured it out. And I just, and every now and again, I still get hung up. And what I'll do is I'll grab the dictionary and I go right back to that same thing. Like I'll figure out what the sentiment through the root words are. And then I'll be able to better formulate the sentence. Just even sounding out doesn't work. So what inevitably started happening is that reading started getting easier, but then also processing what people are telling me. Instead of sitting there trying to scratch my head, trying to figure out what they were saying, I learned how to say, can you do me a favor? Ask that again and ask it in a different way.
Yeah.
And it worked. And it worked really, really well. First couple of years were rough. But once I got a cadence to it and I started figuring out how to work with it, that was great. And along the way, I also, so my whole life, I had to study other people's behaviors. Like, I'm convinced people who are dyslexic, we have like these survival skills.
Yeah,
we
definitely.
have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely have to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I got really good at watching people and how they behave. One of my innate skills is finding patterns. Like, I'm that weirdo that can stand next to a car engine and listen to it and tell you if its timing is off.
Oh my God, you can do that too.
Yeah. So I'm mechanically inclined. Like, I can hear that the pattern of the engine is off just by slightly. Like when I'm listening to music, I can tell if it is slightly sharp or if it's minor.
Yeah, I get you.
So somebody's singing a B note, and I can tell you if they're flat or if they're sharp. Right? I can just hear it. I don't have perfect pitch, but I can pick out in the crowd who's off.
Yeah.
Right. So that is like forming a pattern.
Yeah.
And so what had happened is that eventually, with my having to come up with these ways of interpreting people my whole life without the luxury of having a dictionary, I started seeing patterns, and I started patterns in how people responded. And that's how I started coordinating everything together. So when I was confused about something, I would watch for the pattern. Because I understood that people respond normally in a certain way. Well, guess what? That became the big cheat code of being a really good HR person that could call BS on people that were trying to wiggle out of responsibility.
I hear you.
Or somebody would do something, and I'm like, okay, now it became a predictor, right? Because one of the things that I have to do as an HR pro with my clients, with, even being in the HR seat itself, and I've now consulted to over 600 small businesses. I've worked in 6 Fortune 500 companies. So when I see somebody acting a certain way, when they get called out or they're in trouble or something, I can now tell as like CEO, I'm like, here's where I think this is going to go. I think they're going to wind up doing this. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to say this. And I bet you if you ask this question, and this question, you're going to get to the root of this really quickly. But don't be surprised if they come back and try and do this. And every single time I kind of like lay this thing out, they come back and they're like, holy crap, you are right.
Okay, let me just ask you just quickly, if that's the case, and I'm sure it is, because it's exactly the same thing with me. How long does it take you to what kind of information, be that body, verbal, that you need? Is it something that's long enough for 30 seconds? Do you need to be with them for 10? Do you need to see a piece of paper they've written? How does that go? How quick or how slow or whatever your pattern recognition is?
Yeah, anybody can tell whether, once you've been around human beings long enough, you can tell when their ego is talking and when it's not.
Yeah.
There are certain fear-based languages that come out. like when people are angry, have you ever noticed that fear and anger look always the same? So like when somebody is angry about something, they're always afraid of losing out on something. People just can't get angry for being angry. We are angry because we're afraid of something happening or a negative impact. Just kind of like all anxiety is the anticipation of future pain. Right? So when you see those things, when you see somebody who's anxious, it's like if you keep it simple and you realize that, okay, this person is afraid of something happening, let's talk about that. Like, help me understand why you're concerned about this. And they'll tell you.
Yeah,
right? You ask it in that way. Yeah. So if they can articulate it really well, now you got something to work with. But if they can't, and it's this cyclical going round and round and round and round and round, and you feel like, oh, I'm losing control of this situation, that's your ego talking.
Let's go a bit back, because there's something that my spider senses are tingling to ask you, and I don't know why I need to ask you this question, but you said you got to a stage where you spoke to people and you used to say, could you say that again? And it was said a different way. You then got the cue, right? But before that could happen, it takes a lot of guts to be able to do that, I'm guessing, from your point of view, because before you had the experience and the confidence to say, will you say that again? In a way, it's a vote of saying, I didn't understand you and I may be stupid. Did you ever feel that before you got used to asking them, did you say that again? Because you lacked confidence before. Did that take some confidence before you?
What happened with me is that when I was hearing somebody, and then I noticed that they start, like, we were engaged, like if we were engaged in something and we were trying to sort something out, if there was a problem, or if I started to misunderstand what somebody was saying, it's like I was the one that was getting frustrated and upset. And usually because what I thought was happening is I was being criticized or something negative was coming my way. Right. So then I would start getting frustrated, and it probably was a handful. I wasn't like loud, rude, or obnoxious, but like some people are trying to probably feel it's like, why is she, whoa, like, how are we getting here to the point that Brenda's getting angry, right? And that's when I noticed that, like, when I was in my early 20s, after your frontal lobes start develop, after they're fully developed, your reasoning kicks in about your mid-20s, right? So once I started realizing that I was the cause of frustration, what was more important to me was understanding what they were saying, because I felt like an absolute idiot when I was trying to figure out what they were saying, and I was inadvertently causing conflict, and I couldn't understand why am I always the source of the conflict, right? I knew that, but I still needed to figure out what the hell was going on, right? So finally, that's when I tried it one day, and I looked at somebody and I'm like, okay, I'm about ready to make this whole situation go sideways. So that's when I just said, can you do me a favor? And they're like, what? I said, can you just repeat that question again, but rephrase it in a different way, because what you're saying is not resonating with me. So I actually felt stupid when I was trying to sort through it with a lot of effort, and actually in a lot of cases making it worse. Until I finally said, can you just, and they're like, yeah. And they would do it. They didn't even think about it. I didn't even think about it. And I went, oh, okay, that's what they're asking me. And I'm like, no. And they're like, okay, great, thanks. So I was like, that was it. That was as easy as it was, right? And ever since that worked, and I tried it again, and I'm like, well, I wonder if that's going to work again. So next time it started to happen, I was really aware that I was not getting what the person was telling him. So this time I looked at him, I said, okay, I'm not getting what you're saying. Can you ask me again in a different way? And they're like, yeah. And they said it again, and I was like, holy crap, this really works. And I'm like, yeah, okay, got it. So let's, blah, blah, blah. And then we went on, and I just found that to be the best way, because the alternate was I was being looked at as a very difficult person when I wasn't. I was just trying to understand what was being said. And remember, this was before I knew that I was dyslexic. So I was leaving like a tornado, a path of destruction with my relationships. And it was really demoralizing for me because I knew I was the source of the problem. And I never thought for a minute that there was something wrong with me. I was just frustrated that everything always looked, it was very symptomatic. These conversations I had, it's like, why am I always the one having difficult conversations with people? It's like, I can sit there and watch people talking and it's like no big deal. But with me, it's like always just, right?
Yeah.
And that's when once I realized that I had this magical phrase, I was able to start asking it more frequently. And what was interesting is that the people that were close to me, when they heard me say it enough time, they started to go, did I make sense to you this time? I'm like, yeah, you did. Or no. And they said, well, you want me to try it again? And it was just like, then all of a sudden we were like training each other. Okay. And the conversation started to get better and things started to get easier. And even with people, like when customers would come up to me and talk to me, or coworkers would come up and talk to me, it's like if I wasn't getting it, or if I wasn't, like I felt like I was off, or I was derailing, I knew that I had this miracle tool in my back pocket that I could ask this question. So, and every time I did, it worked.
So when you found this tool, the way of actually having this beautiful conversation, interacting with people, it gave you a huge amount of confidence to actually start the process going towards your journey into university. Because by having the tool, you was able to have more meaningful, engaging conversations. And it took you a bit of a journey before you found something that helped you to be able to go from a path of having meaningful conversation with friends, boyfriends, whoever, and to have the confidence of actually, I can take the next step and maybe I can do, and the university side of things. Does that make sense?
That wasn't the thing from going into university. For me, it was being able to do the homework. It was being able to process the information that was coming at me, because you could ask me a question and we have worksheets where it's like, in 1776, this was when, the blah, blah, blah was established in our country. What was the meaning and significance to it? So I would go back and look at the text, just like I learned how to do when I was in primary school. And what I would do is I would only give like 40% of the answer, because that's what I found in the book. And it was never about the remaining balance of it. But once I started figuring out how to reread as an adult and connect everything together and use that mechanical side of my brain, right, then I was able to start giving better answers. So math, forget it. Like I was so thrilled when I got an A in a math class. I have never seen an A in anything math except algebra. And I'm not even talking about grade. I'm talking about in the actual problem itself. I literally had that grade up on my refrigerator at home for like 3 months. I was so excited about it because I cracked a code. And with the math thing, my 3s, my 6s, and my 8s all look the same.
Yeah.
And what I learned about math was that unless I associate that this is the kind of problem that had a name associated to it that I was working on, and here are the rules for it, then I did great. But with math, if you just throw a problem out there, simple algebraic problem or even a little bit more advanced, if I don't understand the rule structure to solving that problem, I'm just going to give you whatever I think makes sense. And I'm not even remotely close to the right answer. So that was something else too that I learned, is that I also need to understand the rules of engagement. And so that's what started taking place with the math piece of it. And once I realized that was the disconnect for me in math got a lot easier from an academic standpoint. I don't use any of that math in anything that I do with my career. None of it.
Well, I'm glad you shared that with us, especially when going through to university, because there's plenty of dyslexics out there saying, there's no way they can do a higher education. And I'm one of them, to be honest. Unfortunately, it was a situation where when I found out I was dyslexic, and I found out later on until when I went to college around about 19, 20 years old,
Yeah.
And when that happened, I thought, oh, you know, there's no way I do a higher education. And I regret it, to be honest. But I'm glad you brought your story along to show other dyslexics you can do it. You know, you've just got to find out what your strengths are, and you've got to roll with it and find out what pattern works for you within your life. And you may have to work harder than someone else, but it's your life. You're the one that, you know, takes it home when you pass the certification. So that's really poignant for me. So I'm really glad you shared that story to show, yes, you can. If I was listening to this podcast when I was younger, you would have helped me go into higher education. So thank you for sharing that story, because that really will make a big difference to some people out there. So very inspirational. Thank you.
Welcome. Here's what I learned. At the end of the day, I have a code. There's a magic code that unlocks my capability, right? If I don't know what that code is, I can't unlock it. And so you have a code. Anybody else who's neurodivergent, you have a code.
Yeah.
You just have to figure out what the code is.
Totally.
Once you get it, then you understand how your brain processes information.
Yeah, you're totally right. And sometimes you can't, you know, sometimes it's faster getting someone to help you what that code is. But regardless, you're totally right. There's always, where there's a will, there's always a way. And if you do not know, someone else does. It's as simple as that. And that's the same for whether you're neurodivergent or not. But let's go a bit back. Let's go back into school days. Now, with dyslexia, obviously you was fighting and toing and throwing, because obviously you didn't know you had dyslexia. You know, people didn't know what you had. You know, how did it affect your relationships in a negative and positive way? What negative? Let's start with the negative things that really were detrimental to you at the time growing up.
Yeah. So, in addition to some other influences in my life, I became a massive people pleaser, because I felt like if people didn't like me because I wasn't normal, I had to work extra hard to get people to like me. And ultimately I wound up losing my confidence. And I, at one point when I was 17 years old, I became an extremely direct individual, like what you see now. This version of what you see now existed when I was 17. And then I had some life issues that came up, or just, you know, life problems, right, that came up, you know, family shifts and dynamics and stuff like that. But I also had a much different conversation in my head. And it was all surrounding validation, and it wasn't being validated.
Okay.
So I was a highly invalidated individual growing up in many ways. And in everything that I engaged in, I had really, truly, honestly, looking back at it now, I probably had at any point in time, maybe 2 or maybe 3 people at the very most that consistently validated me as a human being. And that's what led me to being a massive people pleaser. Once I started breaking free, here's what happened. Once I started breaking free and I started figuring out this code that I was cracking and working on, and it wasn't an overnight sensation either. It took a long time. Then I was so happy when I figured it out. I was like, I'm dyslexic, you know? So, but the problem is that when I was doing that, you know, your thoughts become things. Like, our hearts and our minds follow what the words that come out of our mouth. And then when things didn't work out, I was dyslexic, right? So then I became it. And then I realized what I was doing. And what happened is that I thought I was being open, and I thought I was being transparent. What happened was I was being too open.
Okay.
And people were starting to look at it as an excuse.
Yeah.
So I stopped saying it, and I just existed, right? That way, what I found out is that the validation started to come into my life, but not fully. And it wasn't until I got extremely brave and told somebody, you know what, you have no idea what I'm really like. And then that's when I realized it's like, you know what, stop giving so much of yourself to people who don't appreciate you. Don't give yourself up to people who are not willing to validate who you are as a person. So I started to push the people that were not of value in my life out of my life. So it's kind of like when you're a commercial pilot, or when you're a pilot, period, right? Yeah. You're flying, you get close to an airport, and then there's these invisible circles that are around it. And they are called markers, right? So before you come in, you have to ask for clearance, right? You know, you have to ask for a trajectory to come in and land. Well, before you get into the circle where you can come in for your final approach is called the outer marker.
Okay.
And what happened is that I was starting to put people on the outer marker. That means that they can't approach me unless I give them permission to do it. Just like a commercial aircraft can't come in and land unless they get permission from the tower.
Okay, I hear you.
So it's a way of appreciating and loving people from afar.
Yeah.
So there's this massive population outside of my outer marker, and only select people that are inside of it. And if those people start getting weird and acting up and start doing like, you know, I love you, you're just now going to go to the outer marker, and that's where you're going to hang out. And I don't really consider or think about it. I will love you from afar, but that's where you're going to be. Right.
I get that.
So, yeah. So that's what I started doing. And then I started working with Navy SEALs. Well, that was a whole different adventure right there. And talk about putting yourself.
Hold on. This is interesting. Navy SEALs. Okay, come on, girl. I want to hear all the secrets. All right. So how did that come about?
I've been working with Navy SEALs now almost 9 years. Okay. And so I am one of the original coaches on the East Coast of the United States with a company called the Honor Foundation. And it's an organization that helps special operations forces transition from active duty into civilian careers and help them kind of set themselves up for success when they get out of the military, either retire, medically retired, or they just exit, right? And it has to be within special operations. So for the bulk of the people that I work with are Navy SEALs. I have been part of this community now for, like I said, almost 9 years. I know quite a few of them. I wrote a book recently with the Navy SEAL. Cool. So I have a lot of big brothers, and so
what's the book? Come on, time to plug. What's the book?
Oh called? Yeah, absolutely. We'll plug.
Well, come on, this is the time to plug it.
Here, you got it. It's right here. It's called Mission Ready.
Mission Ready.
And Mission Ready. It's called Building High-Performing Teams from the Battlefield to the Boardroom. Okay. It was written by this guy right here, myself, and William Branham, who retired out of the SEAL teams for 26 years. The foreword was written by Rob O'Neill, who Rob and Will went to Buds together. They grew up in the SEAL teams together. And Rob was the gentleman that actually shot and killed Osama bin Laden. And so they know each other very well. So he wrote the foreword for us on the book, which is extremely gracious. So I'm really, really, really grateful that he did that. And so we talk about how to build high-performing teams. And so Will talks about his principles of leadership in the very beginning. And then I come in and I teach about my leadership principles. But my leadership principles are dealing with the team dynamics piece of it. Because when you start exercising what Will is talking about and all the things that he's learned from his 26 years in the SEAL team, and by the way, he's ADHD.
Okay, so that's another person for me to speak about.
Right, so dyslexic and ADHD SEAL rock into a bar, right? Anyway, so I come in and I start talking about, like, how are you going to handle this with all your people? Because once you start exercising these changes to build a high-performing team, your workforce is going to respond. And some of them are going to react, which, as you know, are two totally different things. So we wrote that book, and it went to Amazon bestseller the weekend that we dropped. It is sold in other countries as well. So we are internationally best-selling authors, which is totally cool. Thank you very much. So that's how I started working with SEALs. But you're talking about walking up and having a direct conversation with what most people would be the most intimidating moments of their life, right? And because I had developed this knack of talking very directly and straightforward, that's something that they appreciated. So I found a lot of success in that. You know, somebody says, well, I'm thinking about doing this. And I would look at them and say, why? They're like, what do you mean, why? I don't know why. That's what I think why. It's all right. Let's talk about it. Why? You know? So I became this, like Will jokes around. He's like, you have a lot of, you know, masculine energy. And I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do with that, Will? Anyway, we joke about it. But, you know, I brought out the alpha because these guys respond to alpha. You know, they don't do the, you know, well, you know, have you ever considered, like, they're just like, just tell me, because that's how they react,
straight.
right?
Yeah, of course they have to.
I mean, they'll walk into a room, they're like, okay, this mission is totally effed. What the hell happened? Everybody will raise their hand and they'll take responsibility for something. I mean, can you imagine what that's like? Walking into a room saying this is totally screwed, and in less than a second, everybody's raising their hand to contribute to what they did wrong, because that's their culture.
That's an amazing mindset.
It's only to become better.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So if I'm willing to get, in my early years, to exist in this land of conflict, which I really hated, in an attempt to try and get better, and once I found this tool, imagine how my life started to change when my directness actually not only improved things for myself, but improved for a specific situation, and also positively impacted other people because they're not used to being treated that way.
Yeah. And taking responsibility is very, very important in life. And most people don't try and take responsibility, especially for themselves, which, to be honest, if you want to improve yourself no ends, you have to take responsibility, which is quite
validate
powerful.
Yourself first.
Oh, you have to, without a doubt. What I would like to ask, though, is you obviously had a turning point when you was thinking from the point of view, your visualization with the circle, right? Only certain people can come in a circle. Yeah. But what tipped you over the edge for you to have to put something in place, such as the circle? Something must have happened for enough is enough. What was it?
Well, you're going to laugh when I actually, like, where I got that information from about the outer circle is from the movie Die Hard 2.
Oh, is it? That's a good film, by the way. So if you're going to take something from anything, awesome. Die Hard is the one to take it from.
Right? So when the planes are starting to back up, they're like, hey, you know, it's like, we got to push them back to the outer circle or the outer marker. And I'm like, ooh, that's a really great term. Like, I like that. And then, like, when I was in this position, I was in a job where I had these 4 women that were just atrocious. And I was bullied. You know, all of us are bullied at some point in time in our lives, you know, whether we want it to or not. And so when I started realizing that every bully is actually a coward, unless there's some, you know, they need to be clinically diagnosed as a sociopath or psychopath, right? Every bully at that point, it really is a coward. They're hiding behind aggression because they're, you know, afraid to come out with something. And so that's when I went, you know what, I'm going to start pushing these women to the outer marker because I can't do this anymore. And when I heard the outer marker, of course, I always think of Die Hard 2, right? So I'm like, well, that's where they're going. They're going to the outer marker. And that's essentially when I started doing that.
Wow. That's amazing. And now what we can talk about is the positives. I want to know from you what obviously you struggled through the years and it was quite difficult in more ways than one, and many things happened. But with anything that is so-called negative, it brings on some sort of strength. Mm-hmm. So what key takeaways can you bring out from a positive point of view with those struggles and trials and tribulations that you had? And just give me a few positives.
So one of the biggest positives was that I stopped taking myself so damn seriously. And I stopped being so critical of myself because, again, I found a code. Like, I realized that there's a tooth in the gear that broke off somewhere, right? And once I figured out how to make the machine work with a broken piece, that's kind of how I looked at it. Uh-huh. I stopped taking myself so seriously. It's like, you're not so perfect yourself, you know? Mm-hmm. So, you know, and then I started finding a lot of humor in the weird things that I do, because like, I make up my own vocabulary. Like, I'll mush words together, and then when I hear myself, I'm like, and I've done it on stage. I'll be speaking and I'll be talking, and I'll do the same transformational speech that I've been doing for a while now. And then I'll say something weird, and I actually go, like, I'll stop and I'm like, did you all hear that? Like, what was that? And then I'll joke around, and I'm like, they don't give you a manual after you turn 50. And, and then we'll just laugh about it. And sometimes I'll do like a little curtsy or something, right? I shake it off because that's my way of actually getting back on track again. It's like I can acknowledge that whatever it was is just this unique and beautiful thing about myself that probably made about half the audience laugh.
Mm-hmm.
But it gives me time. It buys me time to actually let my brain reset.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'll make them laugh. I've kind of got like a little bit of a routine. Like, and if I really need a little bit more, I'll kind of elaborate on it. Like, I'll just like really take it off and going, and like I'll point to somebody. I'm like, yeah, don't laugh, you're next, right, or something like that, right? And they get a kick out of it, but it resets them, and which resets me, because now we're not taking anything too seriously. I'm not taking what happened too seriously. They're not taking what happened seriously. They can relate to it because everybody's human. And then I'm like, okay, so here's where we last left off. And, we just keep right on going,
No, definitely.
And, and some of the feedback that I get is like, you are like hidden witty. Your wit is so hidden. And I'm like, would it help you understand that I'm just a big dork, And so, and so we have fun with that. So that's one of the things that I do. And sometimes, like if I write down a phone number, like here in the United States, our phone numbers are written. We have an internal area code, which helps the call go to wherever in the U.S. And then, what regional area. And then we'll have 3 digits, and then we'll have 4 digits. So our phone numbers essentially are like 10 digits long, right? We only dial locally 7. So when I'm writing a number down, like this one woman who used to give me crap, like literally crap, why I can't get things straight. Why, I keep saying I'm transposing numbers, and she didn't believe me. And I was listening to her, and we were in this deep conversation about solving this one problem. And I'm like, what was the phone number? And I picked up my pen and I wrote it. And what happened is that I didn't write the first 3 numbers dash the last 4. Mm-hmm. I wrote like number 461372, and she's watching me write this, and she goes, oh my God. And I go, what? And I had no idea I did it, right? I'm just writing it down. And she goes, oh, you really do that. And I'm like, do what? And she goes, I just watched you write the phone number. You wrote it out of sequence, but it's in complete sequence. And I'm like, I told you, and she goes, she realized that it was a real genuine thing, right? So, again, it's just kind of like, just let people see it. Don't hide it. Mm-hmm. It's who you are. It's not your problem if somebody has a gripe with it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's their issue to do it.
Yeah, totally. And the thing is, we're not supposed to be built for everybody. That's not life.
No.
And considering that you can only maintain so many friends, so much family, how many people do you want to be compatible with? And when you think about it from those real terms, you shouldn't fear to be yourself, because you're only after a handful of proper friends, right? That you don't have to watch your back with. And right. When I have a conversations with people and speak of it from that point of view, they go, oh yeah, how many billions of people are in the world, and all you need is a handful of friends. So why try to be something you're not? There's plenty
right.
that you're compatible with.
Absolutely. And you know what? Look, let your imperfections show. Because there's a difference between imperfection and intentionally making bad decisions in your life.
Yeah, no, it makes you more personable too. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're successful in your business, because you're straight as a die. You're personable because you're not perfect. And you're not trying to come across that way. So I suppose it's easier for people to communicate with you from that point of view. And the thing is, they have to put themselves there anyway, because they know your reputation, that you can see through them anyway. So because you're good at what you do, right?
Well, and here's the other thing too, is that, like when you're just being yourself, your intentions show. Yeah. Like people will see genuine intention when you're just being yourself. And when you're trying to people please, like they'll know when you're pulling that card. Like they're like some people who are not very observant, they won't know that you're working on getting in their brain. But and you know, and not everybody sees a manipulator, and there's positive manipulation and there's negative manipulation, right? But when your intentions are straightforward and all you really are doing is looking for the win out of everything.
Yeah. And you're doing it to service to yourself, to be honest, because by the time you're playing Mr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, because you're not being genuine, you're pulling in the wrong amount of crowds, because the crowd thinks you're, you know, person B, but you're really person A. So you draw what you're showing.
Absolutely.
So you're just slowing the process for yourself. So you might as well be who you are. And the great thing with being who you are, if you're not happy with who you are, it's easier to change, because, you know, it's a bit like being, how can I say, open bare in a shop, being seen from the outside in with people walking past, and it's like, oh, I can't hide. I've got to do better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you change much faster.
Yeah, and you know what? People appreciate genuine authenticity, and if they don't, they can go to the outer marker. It's as simple as that.
I like that. Go to the. Do you know what? It's your fault. I'll be watching Die Hard 2 now in a completely different way. And I blame you. I'll be looking for that one scene, and I'll forget the rest of the film, and that's due to you. Brenda, that was
Bruce Willis's royalties are going to go up this weekend.
No,
I should get
sure.
a check for that.
No, for sure. I mean, I love your skill set. I'm the same way, and when I have my clients, it's the same thing. I see patterns, and that's how I can listen to them and solve a problem very, very quickly, because half the time I don't know how I solve it. I just see a pattern and it just works. So I totally understand where you're coming from, and there's the strength in it. And so tell us more. Now you're cheating, because you are cheating now. You've got an unfair advantage. You dyslexic person, you're now cheating with this tool for free, because you're not using anything other than your senses. How do you apply that within your business? Now, you've given us just a bit of background, but how do you apply that? Let's talk more deep within your business and how you apply those superpowers we've spoken about.
So I shared earlier that I work with leaders to help them cut through the drama so they can get to the heart of whatever's going on. So I'm going to give your audience listeners a free gift. If they want this, I have a free course. It's called Impact Scripts. And I'm going to give you the very first script. Over my years of trial and error and having to deal with some pretty intense employment situations in my life, and I've dealt with, for some reason my career shook out where I have a lot of experience dealing with like workplace violence and just like kind of scary stuff that a lot of people would be like, maybe HR is not for me. And I'm very proud of the fact that everything that I've done, we've never lost an employee, and an employee has never gotten hurt once we started, addressing the situation. Like every termination that I've ever done of these individuals, we did it safely, and I'm very, very proud of that. Because I would hate for anybody to get hurt. So I learned how to cut through and get to the root of whatever the most difficult person is actually talking about. And the one script that I'm going to give you guys, and you can use this on anybody. You can use it on your best friend when they're having a bad day. You can use it on your coworker. You can even use it on your boss. You can use it on your spouse. You can use it on your kids. You can use it on your in-laws, and you can use it on your outlaws, right? And this phrase is, help me understand. When somebody's coming to you, you might even smell a hidden agenda or something. It's like they're coming to you. You may pick up that they're trying to manipulate you, or you have somebody who's got narcissistic tendencies and they're just taking you around and around and around in this fight and this thing. And like you have somebody that you're trying to present a solution, and all they want to do is argue the past, right? You can use this in all of these situations. And then it's help me understand how we got here. Help me understand why this is a concern. Help me understand what it is that you want to come of this. Help me understand why this is a problem. Help me understand what you're thinking, right? If you do that, what you're actually doing is you're asking them to answer the question, but you're not addressing them as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And if you start addressing people as an individual, like if you ever notice that when people come up and they're trying to address, like bring you to your attention, they'll sit there and say, well, John says that you're doing this. That's actually a very accusatory sentence, because nobody asked you, like, hey, I heard that this is going on. Are you part of this? Right? It's like when somebody says, well, John says that you're doing this. Now all of a sudden your walls are up, your defenses are like, you're ready to go to blows, because it's just like now your reputation is on the line from somebody, and nobody gave you the courtesy of asking, like, hey, did you actually do this? They just made this accusatory direct statement, even though that probably wasn't their intention to accuse you. They're just trying to probe. But the problem is that they're coming about the wrong way. But if you use this phrase, help me understand, it's like, hey, listen, I got some feedback the other day. We've had some things that are kind of going sideways. Can you help me understand what your part is in this?
That's amazing. And
if they say, well, this is what I do, this is what I do, this is what I do. Now there's more of this willingness and this openness to have a more direct conversation with you, because you're not accusing anybody of doing anything that they may or may not have done. And with me, some of the things that would frustrate me at a very young age is when I would get that direct statement, because I would get pissed. I was like, you're telling me I've done something and you haven't even asked it. And it would just, it's till this day still bugs the hell out of me. So when somebody says to me, like, such and says that you're doing this, and if I know I have nothing to worry about, it doesn't bother me. But if my well-being, my work, my client work, my paycheck, my way of survival, and all that is on the line, you're absolutely right. I'm going to get defensive about it.
Mm-hmm. And I tell you what, when you said that just now, you're going to give us that phrase, I went a bit blank at first, and I thought, no, it can't be that easy. And then I analyzed what you were saying, and I thought, you know what? That would have worked 2 days for me, because I was in a situation I could have asked someone that, and I thought, I'm going to try it. And it's always the simplest of things that seem to be the best. It's just that we tend to complicate things in life. Have you not noticed that? We
want to address complicated things with a complicated response.
Yeah.
And usually simple is the best route. Yes. So you can get that course by going to yobrenda.com. Yobrenda.com. They fill out their information, and then when they fill it out, there's also a little box where I ask, like, what was the one thing you heard from me that impressed you the most, or something that you took away that just like totally wowed you? Because I like listening to that. So I like hearing what people say. But if you go to yobrenda.com, you get instant access to that course. You already have the first script. You've also heard another script, but I'm going to let you go through the process of discovery on that. But yeah, you can use these anywhere at any time. Okay,
so in your business, you do one-to-ones of course, but do you do I don't know, group meetings, seminars, etc.? How does it run?
So right now I have a course that it's a 10-week self-reflective course that's called Fortitude. And if you take the impact scripts, you're going to be eventually invited to take Fortitude. If you want to go ahead and jump in and do Fortitude, go to leadwithfortitude.com/program, and you can sign up and get the first episode for $37 and give it a try. But it is really all about looking at your mechanisms and kind of understanding why people act the way they act, and then ability to kind of take they're week-long courses. There's 10 of them, but they're all week challenges. They're challenges for you to put yourself into this vulnerable state, to notice what it is that goes on with you, and then kind of document it. So then that way you're kind of like formulating this new plan forward. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And so the first one we deal with is actually all the stress. Like how you get triggered, why things are the way they are. And so we take 7 days to really kind of challenge you, or you challenge you to be very mindful and to listen and actually, scope out and write out for yourself what it is that and to really start becoming aware, because I wasn't able to change until I became aware, right? Yeah. And that's half the battle right there.
Yeah.
Because we behave our way into a situation, and now we have to behave our way out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that is Fortitude, and then it'll give you the opportunity, to go ahead and purchase the entire program. But if you go to leadwithfortitude.com/program, that's what we have. And eventually it's going to offer you the opportunity to come in and actually work either one-on-one or do some group coaching, because granted, if you have a question, likely somebody else has a similar question, and having a nice group of people that want to work and consistently make improvements with how they're dealing with people or talk through certain situations that they're experiencing, I promise you somebody has something else that's going on. So everybody gets the benefit of learning. So that is the path. We just don't jump into group coaching or one-on-one. It's like, let's start doing some pre-work to this and help you kind of break down some of your own self-imposed barriers. And that way, when you get to the coaching piece of it, you're moving from novice to mastery. Right? Instead of jumping into the deep end and trying to master when you haven't even done the front end of the work.
I get you. Yeah, like anything in life, there's a process, right? There's always a process in life.
Yeah, you got to break things down in order to build them back up again.
No, you're totally right. And how can people contact you via social media or any other means?
Yeah, and you can, the spelling of my name is right there. It's not an easy one. That's why I did yobrenda.com. And you'll be invited. You're welcome. You can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I have a YouTube channel. Like, I go live almost every day, and I talk about these little nuggets, so you can find all of that good stuff. And then I'm on TikTok. And
community, I'll have all the details down below. You'll be able to click to make life easier, because trust me, a surname is not easy. So you will have all the details down below, and as you can see, the reason why she is good at what she does is because of her journey and how hard and how easier it has been, and then she's used those skills, real life skills, and to apply it to help people. As you can see, she's well qualified to do that. So this is why I do these podcasts, not only to show a person who is successful within their business, but it doesn't happen overnight. It's people that are using the skills that they've got through life choices, life actual actions, and applied it to their business, which makes them have superpower gifts. Would you not say, Brenda?
Yeah, I completely agree. Take your kryptonite, turn it into superpower.
I'm telling you, there's no two ways about it. Unfortunately, Brenda, we'll have to put a line in the sand, and I could, I'm so blessed to meet people such as yourselves, and I wish I could stay on for a bit longer, but unfortunately not. So we'll have to leave it there. Brenda, thank you for joining us and having your precious time given to us.
Well, I really appreciate you making the space for all of this, and thanks to everybody who's listening, and and congratulations everybody for making the decision to step up and find the best version of yourself, because it's in there. Yeah, you just have to peel back the layers of that onion.
Yeah, and congratulations, Brenda. You coming on here and actually talking about how you went to university and all those other important things, because you've just actually at least changed one person's mind that, hey, I can do this. You've done that today, Brenda. At least one person's life you've changed. So thank you for sharing the space with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
In the meantime, community, we will hear from you and see you soon. And sayonara.